Idaho Drinkerinos, welcome to episode 20 of the Idaho Booze Podcast with me, Steve Kuntz. We have a real treat for you this week with Cinder Wine's co-founder and Idaho Booze Podcast poet laureate, Joe Schner. Joe is going to tell you all about how he and his wife came to start one of the best wineries in the Snake River Valley region. It's a nice long chat and one that I think you will enjoy because, well, I enjoyed it. So awesome guy, amazing wines. You'll hear from Joe in just a little bit. We've also got some new beers from Loose Screw. We have some Cinder wines we're going to review and other fun stuff in Friday Night Pints. So lots to get to today on this 20th mega episode of the Idaho Booze Podcast. This show is brought to you by Boise Beer Buddies. Going out for beers has become very pricey. With some breweries charging $8 a pint, you need some way to offset that cost while still going out and drinking beers. The secret code to drinking cheap in the Gem State is the Boise Beer Buddies card. The card, and now an amazing Beer Buddies app and digital card, grants you access to hundreds of dollars in savings every single day at bars, restaurants, breweries, and tap rooms all across the state. The best part is the cost. It's only $25 a year. And if you're a listener to this podcast, then you know we got you covered, along with your favorite drinking buddy, with 2-for-1 Boise Beer Buddies cards using my promo code BOOZEPOD. Let's face it, you're already buying the beer. Now be a buddy. Get your Boise Beer Buddies membership today at boisebeerbuddies.com. Use promo code BOOZEPOD at checkout, all one word there, BOOZEPOD, and get a free year-long membership when you purchase one. That's promo code BOOZEPOD. Be a buddy and sign up for Boise Beer Buddies today. Welcome back to the show. Joe Schner from Cinder Wines is coming up along with a mixed bag edition of Friday Night Pints. But first, I wanted to quickly talk about innovation. This topic came up as I was talking with Joe the other day, and there's something that his winery did that we talked about in the interview that sort of changed the games for wineries here in Idaho. So I'll let him explain that in the interview. But the important part here is that it was an innovation he saw happening far away from here and brought it to the Gem State. Cinder, as you will find out, has also been on the forefront of viticulture here in Idaho when it comes to planting and utilizing grapes, sort of new to the Snake River Valley region, that he and his wife saw could possibly work here. And we get into that more in the interview, so you'll be able to hear more of that coming up here with Joe about sort of how that all works. It's really, really super interesting and something we also talked about with Earl Sullivan from Talia. But Joe gets more into kind of the way they choose the grapes and how they kind of figured out to use them here in the Snake River Valley where they're, you'll see. Anyway, it's coming up. That got me thinking, what's happening in the beer and spirit world here in Idaho? And, Boise, as a friend of mine once said, is like a nation state. It's the largest metropolitan region for like 400 miles in every direction. It's great for local musicians, gas stations, and for the local spirit and beer scene. Now, when I started in the beer business, I worked for this little brewery in Utah called Epic Brewing. And Epic came into the market not only just with focused on innovation, but also kind of as a disruptor, I would call them. They were the only brewery to not brew 4% beer since Prohibition. And if you don't know, in Utah, back then, all the beer on tap was 4%. It had to be 4% or under. It couldn't be over 4%. So basically, it was like, flavored water. So the Epic came in, disrupted. They did that. They also went big bottles, 22s, instead of small bottles or cans. They started distributing out to other states very early on, which was very weird. They also had the laws changed in the state so that they could sell all of their own beer out of cold cases in their brewery, which was huge. And something I don't think every other brewery in Utah should send Epic a check every month, but they should definitely send them like a thank you card at Christmas because that has been a game changer in Utah. They also, let's see, what else did we do while we were at Epic? We put our bottles into the state liquor stores because you have to. You can't sell anything over 4% in a grocery store, which is amazing. We put those beers into the state liquor store under a certain designation to sort of control how much we spent and how much we sent them and how it kind of controls which stores the beers went into as well. So, we did that. We expanded rapidly. And then all the different beers that we produced, we did something 30, maybe 6 beers in our first year. Maybe a 34. I can't remember. It was so many. And it was a weird deal. Like nobody else really made that many beers. And now I don't think anyone does now either, but it was cool. I mean, it was a lot of fun to be part of that company, part of kind of disruptor atmosphere. We really did we were on the forefront of sort of this innovative new way to kind of sell beer and make things like almost normal in Utah, if that makes sense. And then so when I went to Edge, I went in there knowing like we couldn't compete with Sockeye and Payette because we didn't have cans, we didn't have a marketing budget, we didn't have the infrastructure that they did. It was basically me and Carrie and Tyler and Marcus and Tony and the rest of the world against the rest of the world. So, I had to do things, a little bit differently at Edge as well. So we changed the brand up, we changed the labels, we leaned into sort of that hop, that hydrocodone hop. What is it called? I can never remember. Quadrahetron. Anyway, the hop. We leaned into that. We were going to lean into sort of our beer nerdiness since we were all kind of beer nerds. We leaned into that. We started increasing keg sales outside the pub, which was kind of crazy because we needed so many kegs inside the pub because we were doing so well. But we increased keg sales outside the pub. We decreased the amount of beers we brewed to focus on sort of the best sellers. So we were doing really well with like Amber and Obligatory and some other beers. And it meant that we had to kind of push some other beers to the side. Wasn't the best, or it wasn't a really popular decision, but something that we kind of needed to do in order to keep it going. Then one thing that really wasn't popular that I did was I started doing private labels. So if somebody wanted a private label for their gas station or their grocery store or their restaurant or whatever, we would do that. We would make that happen for them. We had some ways that we could kind of do it that made it so it was cost efficient. And so we did it. And so we had a lot of these private labels out there that we did. And there was a lot of fun. Everything would be paid for up front. And so we would be able to kind of do whatever we wanted to do with the label and everything like that. I thought they were kind of fun. Other people maybe not so much, but I thought they were fun. And then the biggest thing probably right when I got there is we turned our regular IPA Obligatory into a badass double IPA. That still, I'm going to miss it, honestly. Like Western Collective, if they do nothing else, just put out Obligatory, please. We don't have any other real double IPAs in the market that I like, and I really do love that beer. So if you guys over at Western are listening, please just throw it out for me. I mean, and for everyone else that likes it. Obligatory double IPA, awesome beer. Sad to see it go. And then we focused on off-premise. I did grocery and C-stores. The 22-ounce bottle package went nicely into C-stores and grocery stores. We did a whole Albertsons run. So we tried to innovate where we could at Edge because I knew that competing with Sockeye and Payette on their field wasn't going to work for us. So we had to create kind of our own battlefield. And I think we did a good job of doing that. We also went to cans as soon as we could. We offered some quarter barrel kegs, stuff like that. Nothing like huge. So that's sort of my personal background with innovation and trying to be as forward thinking as I can be when I do these kind of things. Just because you look at a market and you look at how it is, and here in Boise, again, nation state, so you can't, it sort of works two ways. Now we're getting more beers from the outside into Boise. So it's not like when it used to be in like 2015, 2016, we didn't have all that many beers coming in from outside. So the local breweries here kind of had, Sockeye and Payette especially, sort of had this like head start where they could just they sold. Sockeye was doing a really nice job. Payette was also doing really well. But Sockeye was selling their stuff in Costco. They had two people out and about instead of just one. Their restaurant was super popular. I mean, they were doing really well. I remember just looking at Sockeye, plus the brewing team that they were assembling even back then with Josh and Kevin and all those guys. It was really neat to see. And then Payette sort of had their own thing going on. They had their place in Garden City that was doing really well, and their Outlaw was crushing it. So I mean, two different breweries doing things kind of differently, but both achieving the same goal, which was selling the shit out of beer here in Boise. So that was something we had to compete with when we got here. Us and Boise Brewing and Woodland Empire and, everyone else that kind of started in that time. We all had to do things that sort of made it so we stood out. Boise Brewing, obviously, with the name Boise Brewing, that was a good one. Edge, I think our biggest asset was really our pub. I think we had an amazing pub atmosphere. We had amazing regulars. We had awesome food, and I think that really did help us. It gave us a good jump start to what we did in the market. So that's just sort of like what I'm talking about here with innovation. And I want to know kind of, what do you think is going on in Idaho now that seems innovative? Because I started thinking about this last night. I was on a walk with the dogs, and I was thinking about this. I was like, I don't know what really is happening that I would consider to be super innovative. And then this morning, I came to my senses a little bit, and there are a few things that are going on that are kind of very innovative, I would say, that are really pushing the boundaries of what can be done here in Boise. And maybe in Idaho altogether, because, I mean, we kind of have we definitely have a separated state. We have a whole other time zone up north. So, sometimes I know I get caught in it. I know I've heard it from Sheila over the Brewers Union that we get caught in this thing where Boise is like the center of the universe. It's not. I love the northern part of the state. And so I tried to look at what was going on up there as well. Everyone is just kind of, it would be nice, like, if we could just open a brewery, if a brewery could just open, make decent beers, provide some sort of ambiance, and then call it good. Unfortunately, it's not the case. I mean, you have to look at competition from other local breweries. You have to look at competition from outside marketing companies disguising themselves as breweries. And then there's a huge variety of options. So I think I'm looking at some things like Sockeyes Barrel Club, the Chronicles Barrel Club. I look at that as being innovative. That's something where they're creating sort of a market, an avenue for them to make some more money, a marketing revenue stream, as it were, for Sockeye. Nice pun there. And then I look at kind of a controversial one, but one that's definitely, I think, working out for them is Payette merging with Upslope. So Payette, that merge is pretty much complete. They sent a lot of their brew staff to Colorado, and they're focusing on, I think, RTDs and other stuff here at the brewery that they have here. And they're brewing everything else down at Upslope in Boulder. So that's a really different kind of innovative thing, because they're doing that to kind of stay afloat in the market and to, kind of share costs and to make sure that both those breweries are able to continue to do what they do best, which is make, good beer. And hopefully that helps them out and that works out for them. And then I looked at some other things. Lost Grove they have a salmon safe designation on everything, which is really interesting, especially when you start talking about like climate change and stuff like that. The salmon safe designation is really cool. I encourage you to look into that. It really does mean that Lost Grove is doing everything they can to mitigate their effect on the environment. So it's a neat thing, that salmon safe program. And then also they have these pubs. I mean, if you haven't been to Lost Grove, one is a pizza place, a straight up pizza place with really good pizza. And then the other is almost like an Asian style restaurant with like some burgers and elevated pub fare. It's very strange and very cool and very Jake. Like, I really like it a lot. So Lost Grove, kudos to you. Koenig, friends of the show, basically they're doing farm to table brandies and other spirits that I haven't seen anyone else do around here anyway. So that's kind of cool. Alliteration, our friend Adam, we had him on. He talked about it. They're opening a bookstore brew pub. And I just had the name of this. Let's see if I can find it. Old Speak is what it's called. Old Speak. They're doing a brew pub bookstore. So if you want to help them out, you can go find that online and see if you can donate a couple bucks on their GoFundMe or whatever. Barbarian started out doing, I don't know, James and Bree, you can come on the show and tell me if I'm wrong, but you started doing all wild ales. It was all sours and saisons and barrel stuff. And now they do all those. Still, they're doing those. And they do the slushy beers. And they basically, I remember they did the glitter beers. And they do all those kind of fun dessert beers as well. I don't know. The orange creamsicle beer, I tried it for the show. It's a lot of yogurt in there for me. But other people really enjoy them. I've seen people like them. And, I get it. I like it, too. I like that they're doing that fun stuff. Someone has to do it. Why not Barbarian? And they also have really fun standard IPAs. Their triple IPA is like one of my favorite beers in town. So Barbarian doing an awesome job. Bert's, a lot of lagering over there, which is really fun and interesting. I think Loose Screw is going to do some of that as well. Bardenay doing a lot of those cordials and liqueurs that are kind of fun and weird, using locally sourced ingredients for that as well. And then if you look outside of the industry a little bit, Boise Beer Buddies and Idaho Brewers Union, they both put out some amazing apps on, not like chicken wings, but like on your phone, that are fun and innovative. And, check out the Boise Beer Buddies app. it's not just for Boise. I know it's called Boise Beer Buddies, but it really does encompass the entire state and even like into Reno and Oregon and maybe even Washington State. But yeah, check that out, Boise Beer Buddies app. If you haven't downloaded it, make sure you do that. And like I said, like in this adapt or die environment, this competition really makes you have to step up your game and innovate. And, the next time you're at the liquor store, the grocery store, whatever, and you're going to pick out a standard vodka, gin, IPA, whatever it is, ask yourself this: should I stick with this bottle or should I try a product made in Idaho? And a lot of people say, yeah, I'm just going to try it because it's made in Idaho. But a lot of people, who are a little bit more maybe stuck in their ways or, they like what they like, ask yourself, why should I try a product made in Idaho? Because if you can't answer the second question, that means that enough isn't being done to get you to make that decision. And I would strongly suggest looking into some of the Idaho-made products, especially when it comes to some of those standards like vodka, gin, and whiskey. I mean, like I said, that bourbon from Koenig, that Caldwell Nights Rodeo, it's a great bourbon. I mean, it's $24 a bottle or something like that, $25, whatever it is. Go try that out. See what you think. The vodka, the old Boise vodka, is something a lot of people use in bars now. I've seen it here and there. The gin also, the potato vodka, and then the gin, the old Boise gin. I also love that gin from Bardenay. Really good stuff. If you haven't tried an Idaho-made product, maybe give them a try, see what you think. Because I think that, maybe they could do a better job marketing and do better displays and all that stuff. But I think there are a lot of great products out there made in the Gem State that you should try. And if you're not, ask yourself why you're not. And that is what we need to present to the people who make this stuff. And say, hey, you need to get with it. Get some more new customers. Bring more people to the table. Anyway, coming up, we have Cinder Winery's own Joe Schner. He's on this week's pod. It's a pretty long interview, but one I think you will really enjoy, and it is coming up next on the Idaho Booze Podcast. This show brought to you by Treasure Valley Chevron. Treasure Valley Chevron locations at Highway 55 in Beacon Light and I-84 at Gowan Road have everything you need for, everything. Need beer and wine for an epic weekend up in McCall? TVC has hundreds of local beers, wines, and ready-to-drink cocktails to choose from at or below the cost of a grocery store. Looking for a snack? You couldn't ask for a wider selection of chips, candy, and jerky than at Treasure Valley Chevron. Email your next TVC purchase to me at idahoboozepod@gmail.com and you could win a ginormous box of jerky from Treasure Valley Chevron. Welcome back to the Idaho Booze Podcast. I'm Steve Kuntz here with Joe Schner from Cinder Wines. Joe, how are we doing today?
Great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thanks a lot for coming out. Really happy to have you here today to talk about Cinder. And go ahead and just, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your company, where you come from, and how you happen to be right where you are today.
Oh, all right, Steve. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Let's see. Well, if you go back to our first harvest, that's 2006. So you got to wind the tape back then. That Cinder was started by my wife and I. My wife, Melanie Krause, she's our head winemaker, our CFO now. She's really the visionary and the artist behind all these beautiful wines that we make, and she's assembled a great team now. Prior to that, Melanie and I were dating, and we were in Washington State, and that's where she started in the wine industry. I think that was around 2000. She started first in the vineyards with Chateau Ste. Michelle, their parent company, and after a couple seasons moved over into winemaking. So she was up in that industry in Washington for roughly about 6 years before we decided to start Cinder and make Boise, Idaho our home. And it's been a great ride. We're just, kind of at this point, roughly almost 20 years into this ride. We've got new adventures on the horizon and such, but it's also a really wonderful moment to, have somebody like yourself asking us about our story, because it is kind of fun to reflect back on just the journey and the growth and all the friends that we've made along the way.
Okay, that's a very, very sweet story. I love to hear that. And I love to hear that Washington State is involved because, as listeners know, I am from Washington State. So anytime you can fold Washington into it, you got me. I'm right back in.
Go Cougs.
Oh, my God.
I gotta plug that.
It's been nice having you, Joe.
Oh, no. We have a husky here.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Red alert.
We have a husky who owns retrievers is what the situation here is. So, yeah, we red alert. Yeah. Go Cougs, good God.
Well, we
on my own show.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
No, you made a mistake. I'm in now and I'm at your bar, so us Cougs, we're not leaving.
You're not leaving?
Nope.
Oh, God, I gotta hide the liquor.
I graduated in '99 with a chemistry degree. I like to say a major in rugby and a minor in chemistry. And my wife and Melanie, she graduated the following year with a degree in biology and Spanish. And so it was shortly after that she had the opportunity. I was working in a soil analysis laboratory in Oregon, just over the border, just across the river there near the McNary Dam, really in the heart of wine country. The Washington wine industry, the heart of it is definitely in eastern Washington and around the Tri-Cities in Kennewick. So she saw a perfect opportunity to apply her biology, her Spanish degree, also her background in ag. It all kind of clicked for her. And really there's just a giant debt of gratitude that both Melanie and I have for the many mentors and opportunities that the Washington wine industry provided her.
I didn't know that you could study the biology and chemistry of Jack Daniels. I didn't know that was a thing.
No.
Good to hear that they have expanded their syllabus out there.
Yeah, it is interesting because a lot of people ask, did you ask Melanie if she got an enology degree or a viticultural degree? Now Washington State University has a real, full-blown program, but I think they started a small pilot program maybe the year or 2 years after she graduated, maybe somewhere around 2001, 2002. But she's got, if you have a solid biology or chemistry background, that's a really good step into the wine industry. I will say that if we want to break it down into, the most important thing that Melanie brought to the table, I think it was in the very beginning was her palate. She grew up here in Boise, in South Boise, with two great older brothers and just a fantastic mom and dad. Gary and Liddy Krause, their kitchen is where Melanie grew up, and besides her mom in that kitchen, paying attention to flavors. And I think not everybody has that opportunity. I know that when I grew up, it was 5 kids and you ate as fast as you could because you wanted seconds, and there wasn't too much, at least for me, paying attention to flavors. It was eat fast. But Melanie's childhood, there was canning vegetables. There was really paying attention to the harvest. They grew up on a big acreage out there in South Boise. So by the time I met her in college, she already had a palate and was already a pretty good cook. So I think that's a common theme with a lot of winemakers, certainly where I find myself enjoying their winemaking. They also, it's a good thing to visit their kitchen.
Yeah, pretty much every winemaker I've ever met could be a chef, and pretty much every chef I've met could probably be a winemaker, for sure. So you guys happen to be at Wazoo in Pullman right around 1998, 99, 2000. So just for everyone that doesn't know and has maybe been to Walla Walla, I've been to Walla Walla several times. My parents live out by there, so I go all the time. When I was a kid and I lived out there, when I lived in Washington State, growing up there, pretty much the Tri-Cities and Walla Walla was just, it was like, you didn't really go there. There wasn't really anything there. So you guys happened to be there right when that scene was kind of starting. What was that like as things were kind of kicking up there? Which wineries were there then that are still here now? What were you guys seeing while you guys were out there?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, now of course when you go back to Walla Walla, it's undergone a tremendous transformation. And
what is it, like 144 wineries or something like that?
I wouldn't doubt it. And I want to say maybe in 2000, I'll be corrected by my buddies in Washington, and that's okay. But maybe there was a dozen, maybe 20, and there was your classic labels were up there. But I remember I really fell in love with a tiny label called Tamarack Cellars. They were out at the airport at the time.
Yeah.
And you know how it is when it taught me a lesson right away. There's nothing cooler than walking in and accidentally bumping into the actual winemaker in a winery. That just is a special connection.
Sure.
And at the time, we were my girlfriend at the time was in the wine industry. So boom, automatically, hey, let's come behind the curtain. Let's look around. And that was really wonderful, a wonderful experience to go through. And as we went further and further in our careers, we knew we got hitched. It was 2005, and we knew we wanted to both kind of someday be our own bosses. We both have a sort of special stubborn personalities, and we looked at Melanie's skill set, and we thought, well, maybe we could build a wine label around this. So we had it narrowed down to 3 towns. It was either Walla Walla, Washington, Hood River, Oregon, or Boise, Idaho. I, at the time, had just landed a job in Boise at Micron as a chemist there. So we had a good paycheck coming in Boise, and we also had potential grandparents if we were also going to start a family, which was on our list of many things we wanted to do.
First thing on the list, pick 3 of the most beautiful places on earth that you could live. Second, go ahead and see if you can make any of those work. And third, maybe have kids someday.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, it's a lot. It's kind of overwhelming to think that we were cocky enough to imagine we could do any of those successfully. But we're really happy with our choice. I think that one thing that I always like to tell people about our story and about why the Snake River Valley is where we settled to make wine is it's that bottle there, that white wine that we have open. I promise we haven't been drinking yet, folks, just coffee. But
I'm not making that promise.
Yeah, in the early days of Melanie's career in Washington, she would obviously, when she had the opportunity, she would go visit her parents in Boise, and she got to know the players, the growers, the winemakers, the winery owners here in the Snake River Valley, and eventually they asked her to be a judge in this little Idaho wine competition they had going. So she had a great opportunity. She likes to say, I got to spy on this industry. And each time she came back, she said, Joe, the Viognier down there, man, it's good, and man, it has potential, and we can't really get the Viognier in Washington to sort of sing the way they can in the Snake River Valley.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so I think, where Melanie was certainly, I'd have to point out that Melanie primarily worked with just red wines at Washington. In Washington, she was with the red wine making facility for Chateau Ste. Michelle, which is in eastern Washington, kind of near the Tri-Cities, between Tri-Cities and Prosser. Yeah, and the white wine is all made over in the beautiful chateau in Woodinville. So, but she knew that she wasn't going to be a total rookie dealing with white wines when she launched her own label. But it was funny to just hear her start to talk about this white wine in Viognier and how impressed she was by it. And I will say that it's the grape that kind of brought her back home. And it's certainly our flagship white wine. It's probably our flagship wine, period. I think we make the most of it, of all of our portfolio. We make about 1,000 cases. So those early years were kind of fun, and there was a lot of unanswered questions when we decided to start the label, but Viognier was not one of them.
So that's interesting. So did she actually just taste the grape? She just tasted it off the vine and it was like, this is going to be an awesome wine? Or had she actually done had she made some wine with it? Had she seen another winery make wine with it? How did that come to be?
Well, I think what she did was when she was invited to be the judge in those competitions, she would come down and taste people's finished products. So she was tasting, let's say, a Williamson Viognier, a Syrah from Sawtooth, and she was kind of feeling out the territory, and then she would come back, and of course, winemakers are always exploring other regions, and she was talking to other winemakers in Washington about Viognier, and making the assessment. I'm impressed of all the wines, I'm impressed most by Viognier down in the Snake River Valley.
Was it a conscious decision for that to be sort of the flagship, or is that just the way the market kind of willed out?
I think it was more of a conscious decision. I know that when you're starting a wine label, and we have never owned vineyards, and that's primarily how a lot of winemakers start off. You can only buy what grapes are out there. Mm-hmm. And the Snake River Valley, there are like the pioneers of the valley that might correct me a little bit, but I think I'm somewhat correct in saying that the primary grapes that were planted here, it's not unfamiliar with a lot of other regions. You plant what is sold, right? So, yeah, and also like Chardonnay and Riesling can grow in a lot of different regions, and they're also super popular. So there's a lot of Chardonnay and Riesling here, and I'd have to give the tip of the hat to some other pioneers in the region that planted the first Viognier. But I know if we were to say have the Williamson family here, they're certainly one of the first, and I believe Brad Pintler, who was the founder of the Sawtooth Winery, also was one of those pioneers, and we should get him on the podcast someday.
Let's get him on.
Yeah, but the first people that planted Viognier here, we owe them a great debt of gratitude because they were dead on. There's something about I believe it's probably got something to do with the elevation here, but it's absolutely gorgeous. It produces really what I consider like the queen of white wines of the Snake River Valley. And though people do interesting things with Riesling and Chardonnay and some other white varieties here in the Snake River Valley, I would say that if I could only pour one wine for you, it would be our Viognier, hands down.
Wow.
So I think it was more of a conscious decision there. And then Melanie started to branch out. She was also very interested in other Rhone varieties. Viognier is considered a Rhone variety. That's sort of the region in France that is the ancestral home, you could say, of Viognier. And so another Rhone variety is Syrah. And so she's done a red Syrah and a rosé of Syrah, especially in those early years. And then, we were on our way. We have a bigger portfolio now, but, she didn't get too big for her britches right away. Yeah. Kind of stick with what you know is going to be quality. And then she grew from there. And of course, the hand in hand with this whole story is the relationship she developed with the growers, because it has to work for them too.
So what were when you guys started, and I'm sorry, what year did you guys start?
So 2006. Okay. So that's our first vintage.
18 years.
Yeah.
You guys have been going. That's really good. Awesome. Good for you guys.
Yeah.
What were the first wines that you guys started with? And what were some of the lessons that you learned from like those first couple? I mean, obviously besides the Viognier, I guess.
Yeah.
What were some lessons you learned from those first couple of wines, and are any of them besides the Viognier still around today?
Yeah. 2006, our first vintage. I can still remember. We thought it was a big deal. We made 2 barrels of Syrah. Right? Wow. So each barrel is approximately 22 cases of wine.
That's almost 50 cases.
Yeah. So being a coug, we thought, all right, well, we can drink this with our friends if it doesn't work out. We made those we made those at Bill Fraser's winery, which it doesn't exist anymore, but it was right next to the BSU campus. And Bill was a phenomenal friend, and it really helped us out. Melanie in the early years would exchange some of her consulting skills, because at this point she was 6 years in the industry. So she would do some consulting for people in exchange for the use of their facility and equipment. So we would buy the grapes, we'd buy the barrels. It was one of the ways we kept costs down. Awesome. So that first year was Syrah, and then that was 2006. And then 2007, we started to branch out, and we made Syrah again. Now, of course, it's a red wine, so it takes roughly 2 years to get to market. Mm-hmm. So now it was time to make white wines. We wanted to come to market in 2008 with reds and whites. So in 2007, Melanie made Viognier and a rosé of Syrah.
Okay.
And those, to this day, they form the core of kind of our spring release, is kind of Rhone focused. So every spring we normally come out with a Syrah with a Viognier, maybe even a couple different styles of Viognier, depending on the year, and then always a rosé of Syrah.
What's the difference in technique or what?
Sure.
I mean, it sounds like it's the same grape, right?
It is the same grape, but it's going to be completely different even out in the vineyards. So we're going to ask our growers to farm the rosé of Syrah, the Syrah grapes that we're going to use for rosé, in a different manner than we are the red Syrah. We're going to have a higher crop load. So just for example, it might be something around 3 to 4 tons per acre for our Syrah, for our red. And then for our rosé, we're going to probably ask for a higher yield. It might be 5 to 6. And then our canopy is going to be a little bit different, canopy management. And so there's going to be a little bit more shade on those rosé of Syrah, and then grapes. And then we're probably going to be picking those earlier. And all of these things are due to the fact we're making 2 totally different wines. And in a lot of ways, you can consider a rosé is essentially a white wine made out of a red grape. Yeah. So everything that we do, from the farming and then when we pick it, the flavor profile that we're looking for, and then especially when we bring it into the winery, we're making a white wine. So what that means is we're really only, when it gets to fermentation, we're really only dealing with the juice. One of the big differences when you make red wine versus a white wine, when you bring it into the winery, a red wine is sometimes destemmed and then crushed, but basically the bottom line is that when the fermentation happens, the reds are still on their skin. It's all about that beautiful chemistry that happens during fermentation with a red wine on the skins, because we're really getting everything out of the skins, the color,
pulling everything out of
the color, the texture,
tannins?
The aromas,
is that what tannins
the tannins, yep. That whole family of compounds. When it comes to a white wine, for the most part, what we do is we bring those grapes in and we press them. So we're just press the juice out and we're dealing with just liquid. Yeah. So the stems,
like a cider sort of.
You're pressing it. Now with a rosé, you might leave it on the skins a little bit just to get color, a little bit of pink or salmon, but you're not starting the fermentation until you just have clean, clear juice or slightly colored juice, and then you're starting the fermentation. And those fermentations are kept at a really cool temperature, whereas the reds, for instance, reds will ferment in our winery in Garden City. They'll ferment at, say, 80, 85, 88 degrees. They're going to get warm, and that's okay. You can kind of imagine that as like your coffee. You want hot temperatures when you're making tea or coffee, right? And you're going to get better extraction of all these interesting compounds. And then with the white wines, when we have just that juice, we're keeping them cool. We don't want the fermentation to go too fast. And by keeping it cool, we're sort of protecting the white wine, and we're making sure that we don't lose any of the beautiful, tiny aromatic compounds that make a white wine like this Viognier so special. Mm-hmm. If we didn't control those temperatures, if we didn't keep those temperatures, let's say in the 50 degree range, 55, let's say, the fermentation would go too quickly and too rapidly. And one of the byproducts of fermentation is alcohol, another is CO2, and another is heat. Yep. And if we produce too much CO2 in too short of a window, because the temperature isn't controlled, then it's really cool. It will look like it's almost boiling. The vat, the tank, whatever you have it in, it looks like it's boiling. Of course, it's not boiling as we would think it. It's not the temperature, but there's so much CO2 being released, it boils, and that boiling will unfortunately kind of wick out all of the little aromatic molecules that are delicate, and bye-bye, there goes all your flavors and aromas and
flavor.
Yeah, and you have a very
so
sad white wine. Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this or not, but with brewing, there's two different types of yeast that are used. There's lager yeast and there's ale yeast, and one of them ferments on top and one of them on the bottom. I can never remember which one is which. I think lager is bottom and I think ale is top. I could be wrong. Okay. But lager, you have to ferment at a lower temperature, at 33, 34 degrees, With ale, you can ferment them anywhere from 55 to 75 degrees. It doesn't really matter. So your guys, the yeast you use it sounds like it can ferment at any of those temperatures, but you want obviously the white wines and probably the reds as well to be fermented. So you ferment them at a lower temperature. Does that make do other wineries ferment at a higher temperature to make different wines, or do they do that, or does everyone try to keep it right around that 50 degrees?
Yeah, there's a similarity there. There's a similarity, but it's and it has to do more with...
Is there a lager wine is what I'm asking.
Totally, I get it. And your lager, it kind of makes sense. Your lagers are more crisp, refreshing. They're more delicate, maybe you could say. And then the ales are more robust. And I think, and the temperatures are lower for the more delicate beer and a little bit higher for the more robust beer. And that's because you want different things at the end of the day. And I think you could then, on simplistic terms, you could say white wines in general, not all of them, but most of them are more like lagers, and you want to keep those temperatures lower. And then red wines are more like an ale. They can benefit from warmer temperatures. I wouldn't necessarily say that the yeasts are... Then when it comes to yeasts, I would say that, probably like brewers, winemakers have a library of yeasts. Oh, no If you go into our winery and go for a tour, we have a little area where we talk about yeasts, and you can see the shelf with all the bags of yeast. And it looks like little bags of coffee, about that size. And there's a lot of variety that my wife and her team will use. They've come to find that there's some nuance in particular yeasts and how they operate and sort of what they help the wine do during fermentation. So she certainly has yeasts she likes for whites, for reds, but then even inside her red wine portfolio, she might have ones that she enjoys for Syrahs or for Tempranillos, etc. So you can really go down a rabbit hole, but you've definitely hit on a clear relationship there, which is with brewing, where we kind of have those lighter lagers, and that process is similar to your lighter white wines, and then the ales are a little bit more similar to reds. And I would say that to touch on your other part of the question, do other winemakers do things differently with regards to their winemaking? Absolutely. To do with their temperatures, I would say when it comes to white wines, you're really running a risk if you don't keep your temperatures low during fermentation, that you're going to be out of business pretty soon, because your white wines are going to be kind of like, I would say, just flat, and you lose all the booze. Now there's all sorts of interesting things that red wines you can do. There's cold soaks. There's all sorts of cool nuances, extended maceration, longer fermentations, that are certainly part of different winemakers' approaches to red wines. But that idea of you gotta be able to control temperature if you're going to make aromatic white wines, or you're going to be in a world of hurt. Now you could have that. You could have a cave. You could do that with a cave in the old days, or you could nowadays it's with... I like
a good wine cave.
Yeah, wine cave. Glycol tanks, that's really... So there is some investment you have to make to make something that's like this Viognier. You got to sink some money into a little bit of capital. Glycol chillers and stainless steel tanks that are jacketed.
The nice thing about those is they never break down or need repair, right?
I'm hearing the... little bit of sarcasm. Our cellar,
quite a bit.
Our cellar master Jack would disagree vehemently with you, but he's not here today. As the part of the marketing and sales, yes, I will tell you, it's all simple.
I've noticed that you guys use a lot of different grapes. You guys have a ton of different wines that are available. You have a really nice portfolio of wines. What sort of grapes are you using? Are you 100% Idaho with your grapes, or are you using grapes from other regions? Where do you guys kind of pick and choose your grapes from?
Well, when we started Cinder in 2006, it was with the idea that we were going to always be about this local region, the Snake River Valley, which is essentially like this high elevation desert, AVA, American Viticultural Area. It's a federal designation. I think it was designated in 2007. and it runs essentially from kind of Twin Falls, Idaho, to over into Oregon, like Ontario, Oregon. So almost exclusively our wines have been made from this region, and that's even where our name comes from. Cinder is named after the volcanic cinder, the volcanic rock that is underneath a lot of the vineyards here. So this area, the Snake River Valley, AVA, if you look at it on a map, the border of that viticultural area is essentially the shoreline of ancient Lake Idaho, which was here something along the lines of 15 million years ago.
1972.
So we have lake sediment here, and then there was volcanic activity underneath the water, underneath the lake. So we have a lot of volcanic deposits. So it was always about let's go to Boise. Let's see what other varieties other than Viognier catch our eye. Let's make a go for it. And wine is so, I think one of the reasons that people love it so much is that people understand that wine is tied to a place. And so there's been a couple of years, specifically 2017, where we had to source outside of Idaho, I should say, because of a frost. Yeah. But for the most part, I would say if you look at our entire portfolio and what we've made in 18 or plus years, 97% of it is from the Snake River Valley. Now, that does go over into Oregon. So we do work with the Martin family over in Adrian, Oregon, and they have a outstanding vineyard there called Emerald Slope. So we do purchase from them. We do have a great relationship with that family. They're wonderful, but they're part of the Snake River Valley as well.
Yeah, you can grandfather them in. They're part of the AVA, so you get to use that. It's all good. Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. It's great that you're using so many Idaho-based grapes. That's really refreshing. So it sounds like you guys had some help when you started up. You talked about the Williamson family and how they maybe helped get you guys along. And I've heard that you guys kind of are doing the same. You're kind of paying it forward by helping other wineries out. How many different wineries have you guys incubated there at Cinder and helped out? And what has been kind of the impetus for that? Because a lot of us are, very competitive, and it seems like you guys are just really, really super nice to everybody that comes in. So what has that kind of been like? Who have you kind of had come through the doors, and what is that process like too when you start to see them go out and kind of make their own way in the wine industry?
Yeah, I would say that, we've had really good business relationships with several labels in during their growth period, and it's certainly not, just altruistic. These were business relationships that made sense. I would say, let's see, if you were to go through our kind of chronologically, 2006, Bill Frazier, we make 2 barrels at his site. Again, due to Melanie being able, having a friendship with Bill being a really generous and kind guy, and also he wanted some consulting on his winemaking. 2007, a similar relationship, because now we're bigger, happens with our white wines at Sawtooth and Brad Pintler, and then our red wines out at Parma Ridge, out in Parma. And again, trading for consulting. But at that point, 07's done, and we're too big to kind of just be sharing space with folks, and we don't want to burn bridges, and we need to find our own space. So we found a warehouse in Garden City that was almost completely empty. At the time, it's a big building, way bigger than we needed at the time, but the landlord was willing to rent us, I would say probably a quarter of it, a couple cold rooms with floor drains. When I first looked at it, I said, oh my gosh, this place it's a dump. Melanie said, oh no, this is perfect, high ceilings, and she knew what she was talking about. And we've, one of the many times that I followed her advice, and it all worked out. So, but even then, we had 2 rooms, and it was going to be too big. It was going to be quite a bit of, for us to carry. And so at that time we kind of we did like a cooperative. And what I mean by that is we shared the space and equipment. We split the rent, and everybody did their own thing. Everybody made their own wine, made their own styles. And that was with Mike Crowley with Syringa Winery and John Danielson with Vale Winery. And that relationship worked out. I think that ran its course for about 3 years. Mike and then John both went and found their own spaces. We decided we were going to stay in the building. It was working for us. And we ran, I think, a couple more years on our own, in our own space. And then we started up a relationship in conversation with Leslie Preston, who owns Coiled, and Earl and Carrie Sullivan with Talaya, and sort of did another version of somewhat like of a cooperative where we said, okay, we got more space in that winery and that building, and we said, let's see if we can spread the costs out. Everybody gets to make their own wine. We'll be making their own calls, but we can share like a forklift. We can share a press, a crusher, destemmer, all these big ticket items that it's kind of ridiculous when you're trying to make maybe 1,000 cases that you have to go into all this debt. So that was great. That worked for, again, another handful of years. Then they moved out with their own success and got their own places. We even had Catherine House of Wine, had her laboratory in our building for a while. Now she runs a successful wine shop in downtown Boise, and she's at the vanguard of wine education in the Valley. So it's been great. I mean, Kat, Leslie, Earl have all gone on to do really well. Vale was purchased, so that was good. That was purchased. I think that kind of Mike retired and went into a different industry. I think he went on to nursing. But we've met a lot of people, and hopefully they still like us.
I think the main thing you said there was that you had a lot of people in sort of the co-op, as you called it, because you guys had that press, right? Were you guys the only ones that had a press at the time? Was that the big deal? Was that why your building was the one everyone came to, or was it just because it worked out financially for everybody just to share like kind of a common space?
Well, you'd have to ask them why they decided to throw in their lot with us. It's difficult because you want to imagine like a cooperative kitchen with 3 different chefs, right? And then there's a shared restaurant out front where you can go taste appetizers of each of them. What we were able to do and not kill each other was pretty magical at the time. And everybody did it because you needed to do it for financial reasons, and also because we trusted each other to a certain degree, that none of us were going to, one, make bad wine, right? And two, that we all wanted to create a good experience in the tasting room for our customers, because now we were.
I bet that was an amazing tasting room.
It was fun. We had Coil, Talaya, Cinder, and I mean, gosh, I got to see Earl and Carrie's kids, their boys, grow up in front of us. And they got to see when we brought our little baby in, our 2 babies in at the, Charlie and then Rowan 2 years later. So we still see those guys. I still see Earl occasionally. And it's awesome to see their success. We respect their winemaking and what they've done. And I think one of the things that's important to recognize is that, you might be competing with somebody on a level, but if I go back to the idea that wine is about place, you're never unhappy to see people in your region, in the Snake River Valley, making beautiful wine, because people, especially with wine, they start to hear about a region, and then they start to investigate further, and that only helps all the other wineries in the region. So shout out to those guys, and their kids are all growing up, and it's crazy to hear about Ty and Jake Sullivan, and just it's just, it's awesome to see.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to take a little break. This is Joe Schner from Cinder Wines is here with us right now. Just got done talking about sort of the origins of his winery and where we're going from there. And we're going to come right back. We're going to look at some of his wines and kind of go through the portfolio, if you would. This is the Idaho Booze Podcast. This show is sponsored by Like Button and likebutton.us. Looking to make a splash with your next ad campaign, but don't have the time to set up ads on Google, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, Bing, Cheddarboy, Yahoo, LinkedIn, DuckDuckGo, RazorSharp, Instagram, all the digital platforms that you have to get to out there. Oh, goodness. Like Button will get your campaigns going on these platforms and put together a strategic ad plan that makes sense for your company. Not some cookie cutter campaign built for somebody else. Each strategy built from the ground up, tailored for your business. Get back to doing what you love. Leave the rest to Like Button at likebutton.us. Welcome back to the Idaho Booze Podcast. I'm Steve Kuntz here with Joe Schner from Cinder. Joe, what up?
Steve, thank you for your time. This is fun. The coffee was incredible. I'm ready to go for another 4 hours.
Shout out to Costco. Great job by you guys roasting those beans. No one does it better than Kirkland. I've said it once. I've said it a million times. So we talked about the Viognier. We talked about kind of how you guys started. Now I kind of want to get into some of these other wines you have because there's only a few here that you guys sell. Just a few.
Yeah, the portfolio is one of the things the breadth of our portfolio is something we're really proud of, and we stand by each one of them. But I'd be happy to talk about some of those for sure. Like I was saying earlier, we kind of started off with those Rhone varieties in the early years of Cinder. So the Syrah, the red Syrah, a rosé of Syrah, and then of course the Viognier. And those are sort of what you would imagine are from the Rhone in France, aromatic. And they have their special, unique flavor profiles here. But that was primarily what we were known for those first, I'd say, 5 to 8 years. But already Melanie had her eye on some other varieties, in particular the Tempranillo.
Follow that palate.
Yeah.
Follow that palate.
Yeah, exactly. Don't mess with the talent.
Yeah, I was going to say the Tempranillo looks nice. I'm looking at your fall releases right now. Looks like you have a 2022 Tempranillo out there that looks like it got Best Tempranillo from Sip Magazine. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell us about that wine a little bit.
Yeah, so Tempranillo, I always kind of start red wine. Always kind of start often with where their ancestral home was or is in Europe, and of course this isn't, disclaimer. To our knowledge, these are sort of some of the oldest vineyards in the world for Tempranillo. So you'd be going to Spain, and you'd be going to primarily two regions, the Rioja region in northern Spain, into the Basque Country. A lot of reds there are primarily Tempranillo, or that's the significant grape. And then the Ribera del Duero, which definitely look that up. It's a mouthful, but it's a little south. It's kind of north of Madrid. And that's kind of an ocean of a sea of Tempranillo grapes as well. And that region, the Ribera del Duero, has a lot of similarities to the Snake River Valley. So here and in the Ribera del Duero, we kind of have a high elevation desert. High elevation in winemaking terms is going to be, for us here in Idaho, 2,200 feet. And low rainfall here, which the Tempranillo grape just loves. So Tempranillo is you can make a very big, robust, you could say masculine red wine. The tannins can be somewhat aggressive and rough in a good way. And we've had a tremendous success. I think probably the first Tempranillo that we fell in love with here in Idaho was from Sawtooth. Brad Pintler at the time, winemaker, and caught Melanie's eye, and then start talking to growers. Hey, can I get a couple tons of this from your vineyard or that vineyard?
Follow the palate.
Follow the palate. Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna get a tattoo of that.
T-shirt. Okay, tattoo. Yes.
Yeah,
tattoo.
Yeah. My wife will love that. And so we've had a lot of success with it. We kept following that, and then we had other vineyards plant for us. If we go back over to the Martins over there in Adrian, Oregon, the Emerald Slopes. They planted and grow some wonderful Tempranillo, and we still get great Tempranillo from Sawtooth Vineyard as well, and others have planted. And so you could some ways you could say that in Spain, Tempranillo is the royal grape. It's sort of their version of the French have Cabernet Sauvignon. So you're going to get these bigger, full-bodied reds out of them. Where Tempranillo gets different than, say, a Cab is, where instead of, for me, I don't really get like the cherry flavor profiles that you'll get in your Cabernet Sauvignons. Instead, it's going to be there'll be a little bit of red fruit, maybe in a way sort of like a cranberry, but what you're primarily going to get more so is you're going to get some earthy aromas. You might get leather or tobacco. It's a really fun red wine. I love Tempranillo with any food that has a little bit of char on it. So of course, think barbecue season, open flame.
Just on you, I was already thinking about barbecue.
You're in, yeah.
Before you even said that, I was thinking about barbecue.
Yeah, and you don't have to get fancy either. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be meat. You could even do. I absolutely love getting some poblano peppers on an open flame on the grill. Maybe a little bit of olive oil on them. Then when they come off, tiny little bit of sea salt. And you're in,
making me hungry, Joe.
Yeah, you're in like Flynn there. So
with a little Tempranillo.
Yeah, Tempranillo is going to be your jam there. So I would say it's definitely opened our eyes that the Snake River Valley you can be successful with Rhone varieties, and we've even added on that end. We have the Viognier, we have the Syrah, we have the Rosé of Syrah, and then we've added a red wine that's a red blend. It's called Rowen, Rowen. That's a nice Celtic, Gaelic first name for a little boy that lives with us. Rowen.
One that may or may not live with you.
Yeah.
Share your last name.
Yep. Rowan Bradley Schner. And so he is layered and wonderful, and so is that wine. And that's what we would call a GSMC, so Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, Cinsault. Those are all Rhone varieties. Rhone
those
reds.
First three, GSM.
Yeah,
that's a pretty popular blend.
Yep.
For Walla Walla and for other regions here, right?
Yep, you nailed it. Yep, and we just GSMC. It sounds like a truck.
Yeah, GMSC.
So that's that portfolio over there. The Rhone side has grown. And then the Rowan, and then and just a disclaimer so that I don't get in trouble with any of the ladies out there. Our daughter also has a red wine named
the Valentina.
Here. So that's more of a classic Bordeaux. It's a really nice red wine. That's most years it's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Malbec blended together. It's one of our best sellers. So we had made that one first. And so she got to lord that over our son for several years until we thought, just for sibling rivalry's sake, we better make a wine.
She'd run around the house with her bottle of wine.
Yeah.
I've got a bottle of wine that won best in class.
Siblings are great to each other.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
They toughen each other up for the real world. So, our portfolio grew on the Rhone variety side, and then we had this foothold with a Spanish variety that we loved, and we had growers here in the Snake River Valley that had already been embracing it, and more that were doing that, and Melanie was getting more and more excited about Tempranillo, and we did a little research trip. This was when our daughter was only she went on the trip with us. She was 3 months old, and we went to Spain. We went to the Ribera del Duero and to Rioja. We were there to taste. We really went for you. We went for you guys in the public.
That.
Yep, and we did it. It was tough.
Anytime you can go to Spain for me, please take the opportunity to do it. Not just you, Joe. Anyone out there?
Yeah,
take the opportunity to go for me.
I'm willing to do it. When we were in the Ribera del Duero, my wife said, "Let's go to a little region to the west. It's called Rueda. We're only a few hour drive away. The Rueda is primarily focuses on one grape, and that's Verdejo, and it's a white grape. It makes a white wine. And we went there, and we just fell in love with that grape. We were so impressed. It has a very interesting body and aroma that you probably wouldn't expect for a super hot region. And when we came back to Boise, we were speaking with our growers, and I was asking Melanie, could you get anybody to grow Verdejo for us? Who would be crazy enough to do that? And of course, it was the Martin family out there.
I was just gonna guess, is it the Martin family?
Yeah, they already were in love with Tempranillo, with Iberian, with Spanish varieties.
You find it? I don't know the Martins. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Welcome to come on the show anytime. Have you found that some of these wines, the Verdejos, the Tempranillos, stuff like that, have been really accepted by the Basque community here in Boise? Do they really enjoy those, or do you guys just make them because that's what the land says to do?
It's so interesting. It's both. I mean, it's because we love it because it just does well here. But what a coincidence that this large population of
both Spanish wines and Spanish people do really well here.
That's right. The Basque have flourished here, and the grapes that the Basque are familiar with, especially Tempranillo, have flourished here as well. So that's a cool story all unto itself. But Tim and Chris Martin, his wife Chris, they said, "Yeah, we'll do this. Let's do a deal. Let's shake hands on this." And that just shows the level of trust and comfort that you have to have between your winemaker and your grower. Between that conversation when we returned from that trip to the first day when we poured a Verdejo wine finished in a bottle for our customers was a 7-year journey.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Is the 2023 the first release of that? Or?
No, I think it was, let me do the math here. That was, Charlie was just born, 2010, 2011 was the handshake, 2019, 2019 maybe.
7 years.
Yeah.
Well, because they got to grow the vines and they got to grow the grapes, right?
I mean, you can even go back more. First, you have to, Tim's got to evaluate his site. Where is he going to put these?
Yeah.
Right? That's a science into itself, and you don't just jump into that, or you're not going to do a good job. You got to evaluate your site. You got to rip the soil, test it, prepare it, and then
sunlight, water, all that stuff, right?
You got to make. Obviously, he already had grapes doing well, but you got to pick. Okay, I'm going to put a Verdejo block in here. You got to prepare that land. And you also have to find the plant material. So what you don't do is you don't just go to Home Depot or to your local...
You can't just go to Sam's house.
I love Sam's house. Yeah, but you don't go...
I need Verdejo.
You don't
seeds.
do that. Yeah.
And maybe some Verdejo Boom.
You don't... Yeah. They don't have your grass growing program with Zamzos and then...
The Vintners program?
Your vineyard program. No.
Well, you know what? Free business opportunity out there, Sam's house. Get on it.
It's a whole, we're talking about an agricultural product. So right off the bat, you have a lot of things riding on whether or not the rootstock, because you don't plant seeds for vineyards. You actually plant, it essentially looks like a stick.
Yeah.
You plant the root.
Same with hops. Yeah. Plant a stick.
Okay. So similar to like an orchard, you might be doing with orchards, you might be doing grafting.
Rhizome. It's called rhizome, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
plant the stick.
You have to go somewhere where you're assured you're going to invest thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars in the vineyard itself, thousands of dollars in the rootstocks, tens of thousands of dollars in the rootstock and the plant material. Ooh. You have to be assured that they are disease-free.
Yeah.
So you have to go to, there's only a select number of nurseries in the Pacific Northwest that even have the certification of disease-free rootstock. So you got to go there. Then you have to find out if they have that variety. And when it comes to something like Verdejo, the answer is often, well, not yet, but give us a year or so before, then we'll get some going for you. So what an experience, a lot of patience. And in the end, just couldn't be happier with the result. In fact, now, for a while there, we would say, this is the only Verdejo grown in the Snake River Valley. But now I believe the Williamsons have planted it, and maybe someone else is considering it. But it's successful, and it's
and you guys have made it. We'll get back to it. I'd like to talk about the club here in a little bit, but it looks like the 2023 is club only. So you guys, how many bottles are you making of the Verdejo?
I want to say that our Verdejo production is now probably somewhere close to 400 cases. So, and there's 12 bottles in a case. Our club has a definite appetite for that, and that's wonderful to see that it's in demand in such a case that we just kind of limit that to our club members. But there's more Verdejo out there. If you can't come down and get it at our tasting room, you certainly can come and have a glass of it at our tasting room and see if you like it. But that's been a really cool thing, and so the portfolio has grown. That first year from 2 barrels. So let's say 50 cases of Syrah and 1 wine in 06. And now we have a portfolio of, let's say, about 15 wines per year, and we do about 10,000 cases.
So still, I mean, it's pretty small operation still, only 15 wines per year. That's not that many. I mean, that's a pretty good job of kind of restraining yourselves and making sure that everything is up to your standards, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my wife would be happy to make a couple more varieties, and we will. We have a kind of a second tasting room opening that will be all about our second label, which is Laissez Faire. And she'll be able to do some more expression there, and some different wines will be entertained there. But the portfolio of Cinder, it keeps everybody busy. 15 or so wines. We'll do a couple wines a year that are just for the club. There'll be some of them will be ways to experiment, and some will be reserves or just in such a small amount that we just want to make sure our club members get.
You have one named Ville des Jardins.
Ville des Jardins.
Is that a hard L? Ville des Jardins. I got to remember my French.
Yeah.
And that is literally, what does that mean in French?
Ville is town. Des Jardins. The jardin is garden. So it's the name is a little play on words there as an ode to our home in Garden City.
So let's talk about the other brand, your Laissez Faire. Also French, more French.
I know, right?
Yeah. What is the difference between what is sort of the idea behind the Laissez Faire label?
Sure. So Laissez Faire means hands off, let it be. This was over dinner a long time ago. We had Cinder going.
Very French saying, by the way, Laissez Faire. Yeah. Very French.
So we just kind of noticed that. Well, I was picking my wife's brain, I should say, and I had noticed and wanted to drill down a little more to a couple of things. One was, why do we, other than price point, why do we enjoy a lot of these European wines at dinner? Pizza night, et cetera, et cetera. Not only is it nice to open a wine that's less expensive on pizza night, right? Than a lot of you can imagine. At the time, the young couple got like $2 in our pocket. So the American wines that we were drinking, they were high end, but we were getting them from Northwest wineries in trade, right? We would trade some of ours to some of our buddies in Washington primarily, but also Oregon. And a lot of those wines had big structure, and they were gorgeous in their own way, but some of them often needed some time to age. And also with that price point, it was like, I don't really want to open this $40 bottle of red wine for pizza from Guido's tonight. So we would go to the Boise Co-op, nice, great wine shop here in Boise, and Melanie would find some red wines from Europe, and we would pop them and we would enjoy them. And they were well made. And I started to ask her why are they different? Why do we enjoy them with food more, so to say, or maybe not with that we enjoy them more with food, but they're easier to pair with food. And she said, kind of at broad brushstrokes, the many European wines have higher acid and somewhat lighter body, and sometimes a lighter touch with oak than American wines do. And of course, when we're talking about American wines, we're primarily talking about California, right? And I love wines from California, don't get me wrong. But that was kind of the conversation. Okay, so lighter bodied, high acid wines, they're a little bit more food friendly. They're certainly, I would say, if not food friendly, they're easier to pair. So it's simple. You're not stressing about what to pull out at dinner, and they're less expensive. So I said, well, could you make a wine that's of that style? And she said, yeah, I could. And I was like, man, you're cocky. She said, I said, well, how will you do the higher acid? How will you obtain the higher acidity in the wine? And she said, well, we have a hotter region than a lot of European wines, so if we pick at the same time, ours is going to have lower acid, just because that's how it works. As a grape gets riper, the sugars go up and the acid goes down. So she said, I'd have to pick a little earlier on some of these, not incredibly earlier, but a little earlier to get a little more acid. And then also, I'm going to go for that lighter body. How I'm going to create that is I'm going to do a slightly less robust extraction process. So when we talk about when we destem and then crush our grapes, often for Laissez Faire, the reds will be whole berry fermentation. So a very light crushing or no crushing at all. Now there will be, and what that does, I should say, is that it slows down the skin juice contact. And that's where a lot of the power and the flavor and the structure of the wine is extracted from the skins. And so if you do a whole berry fermentation or light extraction process, you kind of lower that. And so she went on and on with these different things that she would do. Another thing that we do with in particular the Laissez Faire Red, which is a blend of Sangiovese and some other varieties. What we do there is all neutral barrels in our aging.
Is that steel or neutral wood barrels?
It's a neutral oak. It's a wood barrel.
Okay.
And
first use, I guess?
So one of the things about barrels is that, when they toast the barrel, when the coopers toast the barrel, right?
Okay, yeah.
They have that essentially like a sugar layer on the inside of the barrel.
Yeah.
And when you put your wine in that, the sugar layer dissolves into the wine over time. And so and it's essentially, it's like imparting flavors and texture to the wine. It's a wonderful process. And similar things going on with whiskey, right? They char their barrels.
Yep. So you guys do like a zero char on it.
So we don't do the charring or anything. Right. What we do is we get a brand new barrel from a cooper, and we use it. And we use it the first year on a Cinder Syrah, let's say.
Yeah.
And then we use it the second year again on a Cinder Syrah. And then the third year we use it again on a Cinder Syrah. After about 3 to 4 years, winemakers start to call those barrels neutral.
Okay.
Because that sugar layer is gone.
Yeah, they become table bases.
Yes, they can become furniture. And a lot of people say, well, why do you use any neutral barrels? Well, neutral barrels are phenomenal, and they're a great aging vessel. And for instance, all of our Laissez Faire Red will be, if it touches oak, it'll all be neutral barrels. Whereas, let's say our Syrah, for example, that's probably, give or take, it's about 70% neutral barrels and 30% new oak. And then of course it's all blended together at the end, right before we bottle it. But
also, let's be fair.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep the Laissez Faire at about $25 a bottle.
That's right.
So if you're going out and buying new barrels for every single one of these wines, the price is going to go up. So this is very much like anything else. You want to make something that's at a different price point. You can't just make the same thing you make over and over again. You have to do it different.
Yeah, and it's wonderful because the flavor profile we're going for requires zero to little new oak, and the price point does as well. And so when we make Laissez Faire Red, so we end up with a wine that doesn't need as much aging, because a lot of what's going on when you age a wine is you're waiting for the fruit flavors, the flavors from the grape, and the flavors from the oak to marry and to become somewhat indistinguishable. So that if you drink a red wine too young, like in the cellar, it's kind of fun, but you taste, and it's like 1 second, there's the fruit, there's the oak.
Yeah.
And you need 2 years.
There's the fruit, there's the booze.
Yeah. There's the wood, It's so with the Laissez Faire Red, it's nice because we have not only do we have no new oak barrels in there, which lowers the price, but also we have half the rent. Right, this is ready in 6 to 9 months instead of 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, another thing.
So
people probably don't realize is you have to. It's just like on a car lot. Like if a wine is taking up space in the cellar, that's where other wine could be, right? So
it's racking up costs.
It's racking up costs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
cool.
The utilities and rent, and
everything. Yeah,
labor.
Come on, wine, pull your weight.
Yeah. So that was kind of a fun conversation over the dinner table before kids. That was 14, 15 years ago. And Melanie said, "Yeah, I can do that. I'll sort of take this approach." And then I came in with the marketing, right? I gotta contribute somehow, right? Because she's doing
here comes Joe with his label ideas.
Yeah, so I said, "Laissez Faire, hands off, let it be." And
That's nice.
Then we quickly ran over to the computer to see if that was trademarked yet, because it's kind of a brilliant little...
You guys fired up the internet. At the time, it took a full start, didn't it? 14 years ago.
So we quickly slapped a label on something, took a picture of it. No.
Yeah.
We got it trademarked.
To yourself in the mail.
Yeah, got it trademarked and off to the races. And Laissez Faire has been... It's been nice. And through the years, we've experimented with white wines and made them and then stopped making them and this and that. And, we've really... To be honest, our primary focus has been on Cinder.
Sure.
Growing that portfolio. And now recently we were able to say, okay, let's get a space, a tasting room where Laissez Faire can come out of the shadow of Cinder, and let's see what we can do with it. So in 2025, hopefully in May, we will open the Laissez Faire Wine Company tasting room. It will be in Garden City. We love Garden City. But we'll be right on the
Ville des Jardins, as I like to call it.
Jardin. We will be there. We'll be in Garden City. We'll be right on the Greenbelt, so right on the paved walking path that's along the beautiful Boise River. Mm-hmm. And we'll be on 41st Street. We'll be in the ground level plaza facing the Greenbelt in the Boardwalk apartment complex, which is absolutely gorgeous.
It's the giant cruise ship thing.
It looks kind of like a cruise ship, a wavy architectural front.
Yeah, it looks just like not kind of.
It's a little bit like a love boat.
Yeah, it's a love boat. Yeah, that's a good name for it. The Garden City Love Boat.
It'll be, and we're gonna do. It's primarily another thing that we were. I believe we were the first winery to do in Idaho. Is we put our wine in keg. For restaurants.
I also believe you were the first to do that.
It was wild.
Between you and Proletariat, Proletariat's not here, but it's between you guys, right?
Well, I don't know.
Those were the two that I saw first.
Yeah.
Was Cinder, yeah, for sure.
We've been doing that for 15
interesting.
years.
So when I was at Edge, we bought wine from you guys.
Yes.
We put you guys on, and it was, we did really well with it, and it was an amazing thing to have, was the wine and cakes.
It's cool.
I totally forgot that you guys did that.
Yeah, that was... When we were in France years ago, this is before kids, and we were at a cafe in Lyon, and we saw them pouring three different types of rosé from the tap. And we came back and started doing research, and I got on the phone I read an article in like Wine Business Monthly, some like industry periodical sort of thing. And there was a guy interviewed. I wish I could remember his name. He was a winemaker in Oregon, and I got him on the phone. And he was a small winery in his region, and the only way that he could get his wine poured by the glass was by putting it in the keg. You strip out all the bottling costs. That's one big thing. And also,
you don't tell me. I worked in the beer business. Yeah, I get kegging.
Yeah, and also with wine, if you open a bottle, if a restaurateur is opening a bottle of red wine in their restaurant, often they think to themselves, and this is fair, they say, I have to make the cost of the bottle back in the first glass pour.
That's why a glass of wine costs as much as you pay for a bottle, kids.
Yeah, for
once
wholesale.
They open that up, that's exactly what they say. So you got this idea from a trip to France, another research trip, and that's awesome. And so talk about how that's sort of, just kind of give us a brief overview of how that's sort of changed the game for you guys.
No, it was huge. There were very few restaurants that were willing to pour us by the glass. So people would take us on by the bottle.
Because that's a huge thing for a winery, right? You want to be by the glass. You want to be on the glass menu, right?
The volume's higher.
Yep.
And that's important to a degree for a small winery. But even more so, almost as important, is marketing. If you are in a little restaurant in Boise 10, 12 years ago, and you look on the list, oh my gosh, there's a local wine, Cinder Syrah, by the glass. It's not a lot of commitment. I'll spend $10. Mm-hmm. I'll try it out. And then now we got you, because they're blown away. And now they want to find us. And it's wonderful, right? Yeah. And it's good for the restaurant too. But the idea of being able to hit that price point is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
With a bottle, right? Let's say I couldn't sell my wine wholesale to a restaurant direct for $12 or $10.
Yeah.
I was losing money. Right. But if you put it in the keg, you can lower the cost a little bit, certainly lower our costs.
No bottle, no cork.
Yeah, so cost of goods are way down.
Just so everybody knows, every single one of those things costs money.
Oh, yeah.
When you can beer, it's not just the can. It's the can, the top, the label, the printing, whatever else. Plus, you have to have a thing to fill it.
Yeah.
So these are all costs that you were able to kind of sidestep. You had to maybe buy a keg filler. What did you do? How did you fill up the keg?
That was simple. That wasn't a big deal. I think and we invested in some kegs at the time. Now we actually
and you had to buy some kegs.
We lease kegs from a company in California, and we send them back to them, and they clean them and they send them back to us.
There's like a MicroStar for wine.
Yeah, it's called Free Flow.
Free Flow.
They're all over the country. Check it out, brewers. If you don't already know about it. Yeah. If you don't know about those guys, it's a great program. And breweries use it too. The real thing that cracked the code with the keg wasn't our costs, but it was the math on the end of the restaurateur. Yeah. Because now, and I had to go over this math several times with wine buyers. Mm-hmm. At restaurants they kept trying to back calculate. They'd look at a price of a keg, back calculate
$300 for this wine, for this keg.
Yeah,
my God.
Well, and they would also, and I understand, they tried to keep calculating it back to a bottle price.
Yeah.
And then they would say, okay, this costs $20 a bottle, so I don't know, I still have to charge $20 a glass. And I would say, I would do the math and show them what it costs per 6 ounce pour.
You charge $20 a glass for a beer? No.
Yeah. You don't. And I kept saying, we stand behind the keg for 60 to 90 days, and it was new math. It was new math. So then I said, look at this. This costs this much. You per 6 ounce. You get to charge this much. That's a nice margin.
Yeah.
You get these are not going to go bad.
No.
And
they're pushed with nitro, right? They're pushed with nitrogen. Or
nowadays, everything's kind of advanced, and now they kind of have the infrastructure, the science locked down on wine and on tap. Mm-hmm. And sort of the way that most people go is like a bev gas, like a nitrogen CO2.
Oh, combo, yeah.
Yeah, and the reason is that they were originally pushing the wine. This is kind of nerdy, but they were pushing it with nitrogen, with an inert gas.
We are all here for the nerdy stuff. Don't you worry about that.
So there's actually, even with a completely still wine, like not a sparkling wine, mm-hmm. there is CO2 dissolved in the liquid.
Yeah,
and
it's a byproduct of the yeast.
And it still sits. It's still sitting in there well after it's been bottled. Mm-hmm. And so if you push with an inert gas, it tries to balance, and what it does is it ends up pushing CO2 out of solution. And so you end up you're kind of making your wine a little flatter.
Oh, weird.
So if you put a little CO2 in, it keeps it balanced with the CO2 that's in the wine. Okay. And that's great. So essentially, you're pushing with the same gas that you push beer with.
Yeah.
You push less. You push with only like 5 to 7 PSI.
Yeah.
A beer, I think, is like 14 sometimes PSI.
But
but so you don't want to push with too much gas.
Right.
Like too much volume or PSI. But yeah, once we did that math,
break the wine glass.
Restaurateurs were like, wow, this is great. So, you have to get the infrastructure. You can't.
It's so funny that people were like against that. As soon as I saw it, when we started getting it at Edge, maybe 6 months after I started there. So probably 2015 or 2016. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
And we started buying I want to say, I know at one point we had Laissez Faire. We had both the Laissez Faires on, but I think we had the Syrah.
Syrah is what I remember.
And a white one, maybe the Viognier. I think it was the Viognier because we had a red.
You guys
and white.
crushed it.
Yeah, and we crushed it with that stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, when my chef told me about it, I was like, yes, buy that. Do that now. Cool. Whatever it costs. Because because we didn't open a lot of wine. I mean,
right.
And every time we opened a bottle of wine, it literally did cost us the first glass because, it would be 3 days before another person would order a glass of wine.
Yeah. I'll give a couple shout outs to some restaurateurs that helped us in, Dave Crick was a huge supporter of Cinder in those early days. And we've had other support from other great restaurateurs, Cameron Lubston at Fork as well. There's too many to list now.
I mean, you're talking about how by the glass is such an awesome marketing technique, but when you have the tap there and the tap is set up and it says Cinder there, it's cool. That's permanent. That's not going anywhere.
One of the even though the restaurateurs were great and supported us, one of the first accounts, we actually don't have the account anymore, but the buyer, buyers change and owners change.
Let's get them back. We'll get them back, Joe.
No, but the Egyptian Theater in downtown Boise is such a cool place, right? And I had happened to know Joy Hart was the wine buyer and manager of the space at that time. And if you've ever been to the Egyptian Theater in Boise, it's like one night, it's like the governor's award in the arts. So it's like everyone's dressed up.
Yeah.
And then the next 4 nights it'll be closed. Then it'll be the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and then it'll be Warren Miller
dressed up again.
yeah, different outfits. Then it'll be like Warren Miller Ski. So each night it was closed, or the clientele was different, and they needed to hit different beverage points, different beverage styles and such. Mm-hmm. But they killed it because we could put the wine, really fine red wine on tap and white wine on tap. They could pour it all night, turn it off, lock the door, come back 7 days later. They cleaned the tap, but come back 7 days later, they got fine wine again. And they could never do that if they were opening bottles. They were just chucking them. So that was a cool adventure. It's done well for us. I've seen other wineries now in Idaho put their wine in keg.
Just between you and me right here.
Yeah, no, not telling anyone else.
It's just as if they're not putting their wines in kegs right now, they are behind the 8 ball big time, because that is a game changer as far as. So my first beer job, everyone else knows this, you don't know this. My first beer job was in Utah, and our brewery was the only one that didn't brew 4% beer. We were the first one since Prohibition that didn't brew it because it tasted like garbage. It was just basically like something you drank to go to the bathroom at that point. It's pretty awful. And, come at me, bro. But we didn't do it. And so we couldn't keg anything in state. And our largest vendor, our largest client was the state of Utah, because all of our beer was sold in liquor stores, because they sell beer in liquor stores there and wine, which is another show. So we expanded to other states as quickly as we could so that we could put stuff into kegs, because it is so much cheaper and so much more cost efficient and so much easier to get it out to the client. And for some people it tastes better. I get that. And it's just like there's no shipping. The shipping cost goes way down. I mean, it's everything. It's a game changer. So you guys changing the game on kegged wine, that is an amazing thing. And I can't believe I forgot about that until you said that, because I remember when we first got them in, and I was just like, yes, this is the way wine should be served. Because, they basically have been doing that in Europe forever. It used to just be in barrel, like literal barrels, right?
Yeah, drink out of the barrel. I think when I got that gentleman on the phone in Oregon who was in the article about wine and keg, he was great. He gave me his time, and he said, Joe, one thing I want you to do, and I'm adamant about this, is when you go to market with this kegged wine, put your highest end, most well-regarded wine in the keg and go to market. Don't put, if you have a second label or something else that's you would consider a lower price point, do not go out in the market. And I said, why? He said, because one of the things that the buyer is going to be concerned about is quality and reputation. And if you lead with your strong one, then they'll see that you trust the process of putting wine in keg, that it won't go bad or anything like that. And he was right. I went with Syrah at the time, which was almost like our only red at the time. But was well regarded.
Yeah.
And he was right. And
totally right. 100% right.
It was cool. It was cool to see. And it's funny. We have a tasting room in Garden City where, obviously we're pouring wine. We're winemakers.
I hope so.
But we have a tap system, and a lot of our wines are on tap. But we have beer. And because that just like when you were at Edge, someone comes in, they're there primarily for beer, but there's maybe one person in the group that would like a wine.
For sure.
So isn't it great
the Valerie Kuntz of the group.
There you go. You married well.
Yeah.
So, but you have, you don't want to turn around and say, I have all these beers that I will stand behind that are high quality. Oh, the red wine that I have, it's out of a box.
Yeah.
What? I thought you were about quality.
Yeah.
So It's great. We do the same thing.
There's no bigger
Cinder.
turnoff for a wine lover than when you go out to a brewery or somewhere like that and they say, yeah, we have a red and white. And they come in a box.
And
the box is from somewhere.
Yeah, we don't know. It's unidentified. So
it's
we do the same. We do the reverse.
Yeah.
But the same principle at Cinder. We stand by all of our red wines, and then when we have the guy we can tell, my team's great. They can read the room, and they see the one guy, and he's like, and we go, we also have beer, and then they go, oh, what beer? And then we show them, and it's all local, cool, crafted stuff. And we don't have 50 beers, but they're so jazzed that we have 3 really cool beers.
Yeah, I mean, that's all we're asking for. And I do like wine, and so we'll go to a winery, and I'll get wine. But every so often, if we go to a winery, and like maybe it's hot outside, or I'm just not into whatever they have, I'd like a beer or, something like that. And a lot of times it's just like they have like 2 or 3 cans or whatever, and you're just like, okay, well. But on tap, I mean, and with you guys having the wine on tap already, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a game changer. Awesome.
It's been fun. It's been fun to do, and we joke. Sometimes we make little goofy T-shirts for our crew. And one year we had for our winemaking team, we made. I think it was around December. What is it? 5th or 6th? The celebration, the anniversary of the repeal of Prohibition.
Yeah.
And we had shirts, and it said, it takes a lot of great beer to make good wine. Because man, our crew gets done making wine. They want a beer.
Yeah.
And so the shifty at Cinder is, 1 glass of whatever you want. And
they'll
hit the beer.
Oh yeah, no, I've worked with many brewers that have a glass of wine when they get home, or 2 or 3. And it's definitely, the opposite is definitely true. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming by today. Is there anything, tell us where you're at.
I have one thing I wanted to do on departing.
Oh, sorry.
Now, this is probably new to you, but if you give me, do you think you can squeeze 1 more minute in?
I can squeeze as many minutes as you got it.
Well, the shameless plug is just go to cinderwines.com and learn about us and come visit us in Garden City.
It's a really nice website.
But I have something I have a poem.
Oh.
How many times do you get that?
Not often.
This is by Khalil Gibran from the book The Prophet, and this is I think you're going to like this. On eating and drinking. And also, you can totally cut this out at the end. So that's the...
There's no way I'm cutting this out.
Oh, God.
Just so you know.
All right. So this is for all the brewers out there and everyone who likes food and drink. Then an old man, a keeper of an inn, said, "Speak to us of eating and drinking." And he said, "Would that you could live on the fragrance of the earth, and like an air plant be sustained by the light. But since you must kill to eat, and rob the newly born of its mother's milk to quench your thirst, let it then be an act of worship. And let your board stand an altar on which the pure and the innocent of forest and plain are sacrificed for that which is purer and still more innocent, and man. When you kill a beast, say to him in your heart, by the same power that slays you, I too am slain, and I too shall be consumed. For the law that delivered you into my hand shall deliver me into a mightier hand. Your blood and my blood is naught but the sap that feeds the tree of heaven. And when you crush an apple with your teeth, say to it in your heart, your seeds shall live in my body, and the buds of your tomorrow shall blossom in my heart, and your fragrance shall be my breath, and together we shall rejoice through all the seasons. And in the autumn, when you gather the grapes of your vineyards for the wine press, say in your heart, I too am a vineyard, and my fruit shall be gathered for the wine press. And like new wine, I shall be kept in eternal vessels. And in winter, when you draw the wine, let there be in your heart a song for each cup, and let there be in the song a remembrance for the autumn days, and for the vineyard, and for the winepress.
Amen. That's fantastic. And I can't think of a better note to end on than that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Really nice. That's the first time we've ever had a poetry reading on the show, so I'm very excited about that. So Joe Schner from Cinder Wines came in today, and wow, what an awesome talk. So we'll be sure to get over there to Garden City to see your current spot, and then May of 2025, you open up on the Love Boat.
That's right, Steve.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for coming in today, and we'll be right back with Friday Night Pints right after this. This is the Idaho Booze Podcast. Friday Night Pints is brought to you by Idaho Brewers United. Did you hear? IBU is going digital with the new Idaho Brewers Trail app. It used to be a map, and now it's an app. Want to know if your favorite beer is on tap at your favorite brewery? Check the app. Want to earn points towards amazing prizes from local breweries? Check the app. Need to get that hot goss going on in the brewing industry? Check the app, people. Be the first on your block to have the app by signing up for the Idaho Brewers United Brew newsletter at idahobrewers.org. Go to idahobrewers.org, sign up for the newsletter today, and get the app. Welcome back to the Idaho Booze Podcast. We have an abbreviated Friday Night Pints this week, and I'm starting with something that our guest Joe Schner brought over, Laissez Faire Red Blend. This blend has it all. That's our friend, as the guy inside our line used to say. This blend has it all. It's got, looks like 36% Sangiovese, 22% Cabernet, 21% Tempranillo, 14% Merlot, 4% Malbec, and 3% Syrah. You get that overripened fruit. Think plum, cherry. That's on the nose with just a touch of spice. As Joe talked about, the acidity of the wine makes it super drinkable, and it pairs really well with food. I ate a kind of heavier meal with this, and it went down really nicely with that food. It was really, really good. On the palate, you get plum, cranberry, cherry, and a touch of pepper on the back end. I think that comes from that Syrah. And what I love about it is that it isn't complicated. It isn't heavy, but light, almost refreshing for a red wine. And you can find it pretty much anywhere for only about $25 a bottle. This is really nice wine, Laissez Faire Red Blend. Check it out from our friends at Cinder. Great job on that one, Joe. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum here, we have Split Rail's Swamp Donkey Red. Fun name from Split Rail. You wouldn't expect anything else from Split Rail. Those guys are definitely doing it their own way, which I really appreciate. So Swamp Donkey is another red blend. This is, like I said, almost on the other side of Laissez Faire in that this wine, while being very drinkable, it does contain some of those deep flavors that we associate with big reds. So, and it uses a lot of the same grapes, which is kind of interesting. So trying these two wines back to back was an amazing example of what really can be done in the Snake River Valley and with the grapes in the hands of two different, like completely different winemakers. This one is, so the other one was like a little bit of Syrah. This one's a lot of Syrah, 60% Syrah, 10% Mourvedre. I don't know how to say that. 10% Grenache, 10% Cabernet, 10% Petit Verdot. Split Rail describes it as, quote, a doff of the hat to the cellar rats that lurk in the deep, dark shadows of the barrel room, unquote. In other words, this wine was made for the winemakers, and you get that right away. Raspberries, black cherry currants, and peppery spice come through nicely on the nose and in the flavor profile with some strawberry and maybe like some plum and a touch of kind of leathery, maybe oaky flavor that you get from some of these wines. The acidity is not as high as Laissez Faire, and that comes through right away in that how it drinks. So if the acidity is a little bit higher in a wine, it maybe drinks a little, it's maybe a little bit more viscousy, maybe a little easier to go down. This one is a little bit thicker, but it drinks just as easily with all those bright fruits. You can find this donkey in 12-ounce cans or in big bottles all around town. let's get back to the beer already. Loose Screw, fresh hop English IPA. I had a chance to head over there to Loose Screw and tried a couple of their beers and was really impressed with this fresh hop. A couple weeks ago, I talked about how fresh hop beers used to go one of two ways. Either they were big, bright IPAs or they had a touch of color to them and drank more like harvest ales. This one, being an English IPA, falls into the latter category, and I am here for it. The fresh hops are crystal hops. They're subtle. They provide a lot of flavor. You get pine, citrus, some graham cracker on the nose from that malt. The beer, really crazy balanced with flavors of graham cracker, honey, pine, grapefruit. It's almost like a celebration. I won't say that, but it is at least a small party. 6.5%, 45 IBU on tap at Loose Screw. And sticking with our friends at Loose Screw, Meridian Haze Hazy IPA. This beer immediately grabs your attention because of just how pretty it is. It literally looks like a sunset in a glass. Brewer Jake used some fancy malts to get this bird to sing, and sing it does. Diving in, you get lots of tropical notes of pineapple, passion fruit, strawberry, melon, and a touch of lemon rind on the nose. The pineapple really comes through on the palate with just a touch of strawberry and melon, and that finish brings in a little bit of bitterness with that lemon rind. Fun hazy from Loose Screw, 6.8%, 40 IBU, found on tap over there at Loose Screw. That's going to do it for Friday Night Pints. I will be right back to wrap things up on the Idaho Booze Podcast. This show is brought to you by Boise Beer Buddies. Going out for beers has become very pricey. With some breweries charging $8 a pint, you need some way to offset that cost while still going out and drinking beers. The secret code to drinking cheap in the Gem State is the Boise Beer Buddies card. The card, and now an amazing Beer Buddies app and digital card, grants you access to hundreds of dollars in savings every single day at bars, restaurants, breweries, and tap rooms all across the state. The best part is the cost. It's only $25 a year. And if you're a listener to this podcast, then you know we got you covered, along with your favorite drinking buddy, with 2-for-1 Boise Beer Buddies cards using my promo code BOOZEPOD. Let's face it, you're already buying the beer. Now be a buddy. Get your Boise Beer Buddies membership today at boisebeerbuddies.com. Use promo code BOOZEPOD at checkout, all one word there, BOOZEPOD, and get a free year-long membership when you purchase one. That's promo code BOOZEPOD. Be a buddy and sign up for Boise Beer Buddies today. Welcome back to the Idaho Booze Podcast. I'm Steve Kuntz. Fun show today with Cinder's Joe Schner. Great job by him to come on in and talk up his amazing portfolio of wines and the incredible journey he and his wife have been on to bring such great wines to Idaho. And then he read a poem. What else do you want? I am bringing you everything I can here on the show. Awesome job by Joe. Hope he comes back when they open up that new place on the Love Boat in Ville des Jardins. Thanks to our sponsors, Boise Beer Buddies, Treasure Valley Chevron, Like Button, and Idaho Brewers United. Go get that IBU Trail app already. It's at idahobrewers.org, or you can search for it on your various app stores on the Google Play or Apple, whatever it's called. Get a Beer Buddies card if you haven't already. Use the code people, BOOZEPOD. Get 2-for-1 Boise Beer Buddies card. Again, it's called Boise Beer Buddies, but it really is Idaho. I mean, it's the whole state. So if you live up north and you're listening to this an hour earlier than where I am right now, get that card right now, and I'll know about it in about an hour. Have any questions, comments, or concerns, send me an email at idahoboozepod@gmail.com or hit me up on the social medias. You can find all those on my Substack, idahobooze.substack.com. Please subscribe and share. I'd love to get this pod into more earbuds, so reach out to earbuds if you think they would like it. That's it for episode 20 of the Idaho Booze Podcast. I'm Steve Kuntz. Good day and good drinking, everyone.